a geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, presented by Black Stack Brewing, family owned and operated. I'm John Bonus from Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Gleeman of the Athletic.
It was a winning road trip. Although it surely did not feel that way. But it was. It's worth remembering that it was.
Three-game win streak felt good. The three-game losing streak, not as much. And then the getaway day explosive inning was kind of fun.
Yeah, that poor knuckleballer, Waldron from the Padres, who just got left in to eat it basically against the Twins, was demoted to the minor leagues, I saw after the game or the next day. We joked about this on the Patreon side, which we do this show every Friday that you're listening to. And it's free. Yeah. But it also has commercials, as you'll find out as you continue listening to the episode. We also
presented by Black Stack Brewing. It has to have some commercials, right?
Yes. However, we also do typically Monday and Wednesday episodes for the Patreon audience exclusively that are commercial free, and we react to games, midweek basically. Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. And one of the things we joked about first on the Monday episode and then on the Wednesday episode, unfortunately, was an ongoing little bit that we have where John wants to identify the worst loss of every season. And he's of the opinion that, you know it when you see it or when you feel it, kind of. It's how John identifies pornography also. That what was the old cliche quote about, I know it when I see it or whatever?
That's not a cliche. That's a Supreme Court ruling, as I recall.
No, same thing. So Alcala blows a game. He's handed a 4-0 lead. What was it, last Sunday in Toronto? Or not Toronto, in Texas.
Texas, right? Yeah.
Toronto. And I say the next morning to John, well, that's got to be the worst loss of the season. And John said, it's up there, but let's wait. And I thought, boy. And then waited, 30 hours? Something like that?
That's about right, yeah.
And Stephen Okert had, I would argue, an even worse loss.
Sure.
To the Padres. And yet, despite all those bumps and that one, I said it's the leader in the clubhouse right now. Yeah, well,
what I said on that one.
Let's hope.
And the only reason I said that is I was like, well, let's just see what happens in the next two games. They've been slipping in the standings a little bit as a result of that 3-game losing streak. If they continue to slip in the standings, if it gets to the point where we are, worrying more about making the wild card than we are about trying to catch Cleveland in the Central, then those losses start to mean a little bit more.
Well, your point was with the losses is that, they're look, if you blow a 10-0 lead, that's the worst loss of the season. However, if you just blow a run-of-the-mill 3 or 4-run lead, which is what we're talking about here with Alcala and Okert, it also you got to factor in, what did this mean in the bigger picture,
in the context of the season, right?
Yeah. And so, that you have to let it play out a little bit, but we do know that the one kept them from being only 1 game back in the Central. And as you said, in the moment, it felt really damaging because you're like, oh, now they're 2 back, now they're 3 back, 2.5, whatever. Well, despite a road trip where you had 2 legitimate worst loss of the season candidates, and a 3-game losing streak overall, they're now back home. They had the off day yesterday. We're recording this Friday morning for a 9-game homestand now. And it begins with them 2 games back in the AL Central because Cleveland lost 2 out of 3 at Yankee Stadium. And I watched the one they won, which was extra innings. They should have lost that one. The Yankees couldn't score the runner from second twice.
Right.
And so
Cleveland then lost 3 out of 3 before that versus the Brewers.
Yeah. And so the Twins now, in the last 50 games, Cleveland is 22-28 during that time, which is the second worst record in the American League. And we talk about this a lot with individual players, where a great April, you hit 375 in April, let's say, followed by a mediocre or even poor next 5 months, gives you a lot more time at the top of the batting average leaderboard. And so because you're coming down from a high spot. And so you then in the perception or how people's mind works is you've spent 4 or 5 months being really good.
Right.
And then if you end the season hitting 250, it's like, oh, he slumped down the stretch. The opposite is true too. If a guy hits, we've seen this with Carlos Santana, a guy hits 140 in April and then has a really good May, June, July, August, it takes a while for those numbers to kind of get to where someone looks at it and goes, this guy's having a good season, even though the end result maybe is the same. Well, it works like that for teams too. I mean, Cleveland was just unbeatable for 2-3 months, basically. And it was frustrating to watch from the Twins' perspective because the Twins would, after their bad start to the season, were playing great. They had the best record in the American League for a months-long stretch. And it felt like, how they're playing so well. They're winning all these series, taking 2 out of 3. They just can't seem to get any ground on Cleveland because they just won't stop. They're just immortal.
Right.
They just can't be defeated. And we even talked at times on the podcast, like the Twins would win, 3 series in a row, and we go, oh, they gained 1 game. And we kind of talked about, well, the Twins can only control what they can control, and some of that includes the head-to-head matchups with Cleveland, which the most recent one they split 4 games at Target Field, and they have 1 left. But at some point, this division was going to come down to, and I think we even literally had this discussion maybe 3-4 weeks ago, is Cleveland going to come back down to earth or not? If they're not, you're not going to win the division because they're going to win 110 games.
Right.
Well, they've come back down to earth a little bit over the last month and a half, 2 months, and they're 22-28, and it may feel to people because the Twins are still 2 games back of what I talked about, which is, well, they've gone 22-28. Why does it feel like the Twins can't catch them? During that 50-game stretch, the Twins have gone from 9 games back to 2 games back.
Yeah.
In less than 1/3 of the season. And, they've made up 4 or 5 games here just since the trade deadline, which is roughly 3 weeks ago. They are making up ground here. I mean, the Twins are doing their part, and they're at least applying pressure. Now, of course, the little interesting aspect that I certainly did not see coming is that the Royals are every bit in the mix too. And the Royals
they're tied with the Twins, right?
Yeah, they're even hotter than the Twins of late. So
yeah, if the Twins would have won one of those last 2 games in the Cleveland series, right, or any of the first 5 games they faced versus Cleveland, they'd currently be tied with Cleveland.
Right.
They had to win any one of those games. If they instead of being 2-7, they are 3-6 versus Cleveland right now.
Yeah. Don't say this. Remember 2 years ago how much everyone had so much trouble with the math, which seemed so straightforward to us when Pagan was blowing games in Cleveland, and we said if they had won those 2 games instead of lost them, they'd be in first place. And people were like, that's not true. They're only, they're still 5 games out. And it's like, no, it double counts because it's already occurred.
Yeah,
Let's not get back into that. People have a really hard time with that. That was some of the worst, dumbest arguments I've ever had on Twitter because it's like trying to explain to somebody that 2 + 2 = 4, and they just refuse to believe it. Anyway, we'll move on from that. So yeah, Cleveland loses 2 out of 3 when the Twins also lose 2 out of 3. They had, the off days Monday for Cleveland and Thursday for the Twins. So now it's back on a full game instead of 2.5 game. It's 2 games, which is nice. And now you got 9 games here at home against good but not great teams. Certainly,
right.
I mean, these are not the White Sox or anything, but St. Louis is struggling and below 500. Atlanta is struggling but still in the mix because the Phillies have been so horrendous here, and they're in the wild card mix. But they're very, very banged up. They've lost 3 or 4 of their best players. They just lost Austin Riley. Acuna's been out. Their pitching is a little shaky. And then Toronto is the 3rd series. And at the beginning of the year, we might have circled this series as a big one. This is a playoff rematch.
Yep.
Toronto, we figured was going to be 85-90 win team again. And instead they've they sold pieces at the deadline, and they're just sort of playing it out.
They sold some pieces at the deadline. They've still got some weapons in that lineup. So.
I mean, I would view all 3 of these teams similarly. I mean, Atlanta's the one that's still in the playoff mix, so we'll give them a little bit more credit. And they have Chris Sale pitching and some other guys that are good. But these teams are all kind of in the same, category for me, which is the Twins should beat them 2 out of 3 each at home because the Twins should win home games, and the Twins are better than all 3 of these teams right now. However, these teams have plenty of star power.
Right.
And even at their worst are still, 500-ish opponents. And so this is going to be a big 9-game stretch. The other note here is that rookies will be starting pitchers for 5 of the 9 games, Simeon Woods Richardson, who I would say is the one who's kind of advanced past rookie status at this stage.
Right.
He's only starting one of them because he started yesterday. We'll talk more about that performance against the Padres. So it's going to be 5 out of 9 started by rookies and then 2 each from Lopez and Ober. And so you're going to get the full tour here of the Twins' new look rotation. And I think this will be a really good test with some of the star power. Even Toronto's still got Vlad Guerrero Jr. The Braves have plenty of potent bats. St. Louis has been down a little bit, but they still got, some big names, Arenado and Goldschmidt, who are older now. But it's going to be a good test here because you're going to see each of the rookies twice, basically, except for Woods Richardson. You're going to see him once, so far at least, I would say. And it's only been, Woods Richardson's been there all year, but it's really been, half dozen starts for Festa, 2 starts for Matthews.
Yeah,
they've been fine, and I would say better than fine, probably a lot of the time.
You're right.
So,
I mean, if the offense was really clicking, we'd probably have a much better impression of where they are right now. But they're getting us, for the most part, 5, maybe 6 innings. They are, giving up 3 runs or less. Like, that's about as much as you can be asking from somebody in that situation. I just took a look at Cleveland's schedule for the next 2 weeks. The interesting thing about Cleveland's schedule for the next 2 weeks is they face Kansas City 7 times. One of those teams is going to win. One team, those teams is going to lose. Taking a look at the Baseball Reference playoff odds to win the division right now, it's basically like Cleveland's at 50%, the Twins are at 30%, Kansas City's at 20%.
That's about right.
That's about right. To make the playoffs, it's 95, 90, and 80%, something like that. I think all 3 teams have benefited from the fact that the Red Sox are. I mean, I don't think that the Red Sox are falling apart. They're just kind of trudging along through an AL East that doesn't give you much of a break on a regular basis.
Well, and then Seattle has fallen apart to the point that they just fired their manager, so that's going to be part of it too. They're the only other above 500 team, I think. I
might be right. I didn't even see Seattle really in the wild card. I didn't even pay attention to where Seattle was in the wild card race. They might be behind Tampa Bay at this point.
They were in first place a month ago.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And they just fired their manager of 9 seasons, Scott Service. This will be a good test. I mean, a 9-game homestand, you got to win more than you lose, no matter the opponent on a 9-game homestand. The point about Cleveland playing Kansas City a bunch, I honestly think there's 2 ways to look at it, in terms of what a Twins fan or the Twins themselves should be rooting for here. On one hand, if Kansas City were to win, how many did they play? 7, you said?
Yeah, 7 of those games. Yeah.
If Kansas City goes
13,
if Kansas City goes 6-1, well, that's going to knock Cleveland out of first place, certainly.
Yeah, but now the Twins are got to keep up with Kansas City.
Right. If Cleveland goes 6-1, let's say, you're going to knock Kansas City out of the division race almost completely.
Right.
But then the Twins are going to have not gained any ground on Cleveland. And so I think what you want, if you're a Twins fan, without the benefit of hindsight, without knowing what the final records are going to be here, you're going to want somebody to go 4-3 and the other to go 3-4, right? I mean, because that hands each team multiple losses at least, so that if the Twins were to go, let's say, over that stretch 5-2 against whoever they're playing, then you at least can, put yourself in a position where you're still going for the, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you don't believe in Kansas City, which I'm a skeptic, but even I've come around at this point, obviously. But if you don't believe in Kansas City, then oddly you should be rooting for Kansas City to go 6-1 or 5-2 here, because then they knock Cleveland off the top. But then if you still think Kansas City's not that real, then maybe Kansas City fades down the stretch anyway. But I don't know. I think 4-3. I would say Kansas City winning 4 and losing 3 is the outcome that a Twins fan should be rooting for.
That first week of September, Kansas City faces the Guardians for 3 games and then the Twins on the second half of that weekend. Right after they faced the Guardians for a 3-game series, they faced the Twins over that following weekend in Kansas City. And so, that's it's going to be a big week for Kansas City to put up or shut up. So
they've already I expected them to shut up a long time ago. So I
did too. They've been much better than I thought they were. Now, they never really scare me because watching the Twins play them, I never feel like the Twins are in much danger to lose those games, partly because they're 5-2 versus, or no,
7-2,
7-2 versus them. Like that.
And then they have 4 games left, like you said, against the Twins. But it helps that they have probably the second best player in the league, I would say, in
Right.
Bobby
Yeah.
Witt Jr.
Right.
And he hasn't murdered the Twins.
Right.
He's murdered everybody this season. But and then Salvador Perez has the most homers ever by an opponent at Target Field, and et cetera, et cetera. And their pitching's been a lot better. So yeah, I mean, I give them credit. I'm very curious to see if they can sort of withstand that, because we've seen this with past Twins teams too, where, I mean, 01 was the perfect example of this, obviously, the last year under Kelly, but there's also been some other, 2017, sort of an example of this, I don't know, I'm mixing up the years, where they made a wild card run and fell a little short, but I guess that was 2015.
2015.
Yeah. Where it's like
they kind of hung around,
yeah.
and last weekend they still got a shot. Yeah. Well, I mean, so one of the interesting. I'm sorry, you finish your point, then I'll talk a little bit about.
Well, I think it's sometimes, and this might just be applying a narrative to something that happened that you want a narrative to, but I
right.
feel like it's, and you see this a lot in the NBA, where a really young team will like make a little run and not quite be able to get over the hump of like the conference finals or whatever. Sure. And you're like, oh man, I don't know. And it's like, well, really, in retrospect, what you saw was a team that just wasn't quite fully developed or matured or ready, or, they just lost the series. It doesn't have to be some big moral thing, but, and
well,
so
or the case of the 2015 team, maybe overachieved a little bit. Got up there, and then by 2016 they were firing their general manager because everything had fallen apart.
Yeah, so it can go multiple ways, and so right. I wonder, that'll be the big test for the Royals at this point, is like, can they're playing really well right now, after a month and a half of kind of mediocre play. They're pretty young. They're certainly not been in this spot before. I mean, Bobby Witt Jr. and et cetera haven't. Salvador Perez has, obviously, with the previous, back when the Royals were in the World Series, 6-8 years ago, more than that. So I'm curious to see if they hit kind of a wall here, if eventually, they stumble a little bit, and then maybe next year, but we'll see. It's a real interesting race here to have 3 teams within 2 games with basically a quarter of the season to go, a decent amount of head-to-head matchups left, for all of them. And, the division is no longer a laughingstock. So right. Fortunately or unfortunately, we're not talking about, who can win 84 games. I mean, it's going to take 90 plus to win this division pretty clearly at this point. And so it's nice to at least be talking about this division as if it's, not the ugly stepson of the
right. Yeah.
Redheaded stepson, whatever the saying is. Sorry to all gingers out there.
The Baseball Reference page also, I usually just take a look at sort of the odds of winning the division or winning the wild card. I don't spend a lot of time on the rest of that, but the way that works is they play the season 100,000 times or something like that, and you can kind of see the range of results that comes back from playing through the season right. 100,000 times or whatever. And they've got the average number of games that each team's going to win. And right now, Cleveland's average is a 91 win season. The Twins is a 90 win season, and the Royals is an 89 win season.
Yeah.
Right. Which, I mean, what that says is, I don't think this thing's getting decided early. That right. last week of games that we're talking about here, where I think we are facing the Orioles at home. Right?
Yes. The last series of the season is the Orioles. 3
games versus Miami, and then 3 games versus the Orioles. You can't get much wider range in terms of who you want to face it then, although by then the Orioles might know where they are, but they right. might not.
That's my hope.
They might be battling for a first round bye in that one, and then the weekend before that is Boston, who's certainly at this point still has a great deal of interest in it. That might be a real interesting week. We might be looking. Even if we feel like the Twins and or the Royals have clinched wild card spots, 5 games before the end of the season, we might all be on the edge of our seats waiting to see if they're going to get the AL Central wrapped up here. If those 3 teams are finished anywhere close to what they're being perceived as, and also, by the way, means that things like the tiebreaker in the head-to-head, which we talked about, means something, which the Twins don't have the tiebreaker over Cleveland, but they do have the tiebreaker over the Royals. And then how does that work if it's a three-way tie? I don't know.
That's an excellent question. We'll never find the answer to. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what I was getting to about the quality of the division. In part, first of all, when you read out like projected, the average number of wins is 90, 91. Well, that tells me to actually win, it's probably going to take more than that.
Right.
Because that's just the 50th percentile outcome for both. Now, it might not, but like I said, I think instead of talking about 84 wins, we're probably talking about 92, 93, 94 wins.
It also means what we were talking earlier this week about, get to 20 games over 500.
Which is 92 wins.
Yeah, I mean, that's 90. No, that's 91 wins.
91 wins, yeah.
Right? So, get to 20 games over 500. They're at 15 over right now. They're at 17 over before this little 3-game losing streak that they stumbled onto. Keep climbing your way up. We're worried about, what do we care if Cleveland or Kansas City wins, 6 out of 7 games? Just win a bunch of games, and then you don't have to worry about it. Get to that 20 game over mark and roll the dice after that.
Well, and the wild card adds a weird component to this too, like you said, which is, realistically, if all those teams hit those average win totals of, 91, 90, 89, like you read, they'll all make the playoffs. I mean, of course, I'm fairly confident of that. So it's going to be a situation where, however, because the division, like we just said, is so much better than last year, yes, they're going to put 2 and possibly, or even probably right now, 3 teams into the playoffs, which would have been unthinkable last year. If they went by just records, the Twins would have barely made the playoffs as a division winner, or wouldn't have even. But what that also means is the division winner, it's possible Houston catches the Central winner still. They're only like 4 games back. Houston's been pretty hot here for a month and a half. But most likely, as it stands right now, the Central winner is going to get a first-round bye. And so, you can say, well, you're fighting with 2 other teams here in Cleveland and Kansas City. All 3 are going to probably make the playoffs. So, worst case is this. Definitely. But there's a massive difference between having a first-round bye and then, by the way, opening the second round at home versus having to play a best of 3 in the first round. And if you're the wild card teams, you're going on the road for those. So that is about it, under this playoff format. That is the biggest difference that there's ever going to be in a situation where, you're the 2 seed and you get a bye versus being the 5 or the 6 seed and having to go on the road and possibly play, Houston or possibly, Yankees, Baltimore, whoever's the runner up there. So,
by the way, Houston's average number of wins in that Baseball Reference is 88.
Yeah,
just one game behind
Houston,
that back. And
Houston was horrible for 2 months. So
right. Yes, they could easily exceed that. Now, they've got to exceed the best of the teams in the AL Central to actually to be able to do that. So,
and then the last thing about this upcoming series is Saturday night should be fun. It's Sonny Gray versus Pablo Lopez.
Oh wow!
So that'll be a good one.
That'll be fun.
I know that they are not a mentorship situation, because I know Sonny did that for a lot of the younger guys, Joe Ryan and some of the rookies and stuff. But Pablo's a veteran already. But they did become pretty close. I know.
I mean, they're co-leader. They were co-leaders of that staff last year.
They are definitely both pitching nerds too. I mean, the type of conversations that they would have, I think, are a lot different than they might have with other guys, because both of them, if you get them talking about, pitch mix and game theory and all this, the mechanical stuff, they'll talk forever about that, particularly Sonny. So that should be a good matchup. Sonny Gray hasn't been very good for a while here. And Pablo Lopez had a real rough patch and has sort of come through it a little bit better, but this will be a good.
I mean, he's been slogging his way through this year. He's not making it look easy, even when he's having success. You can see he's sweating through it. So
before we give a whole bunch of the latest injury updates on Correa and Buxton, etc., let's talk a little bit our first group of sponsors here. We mentioned Blackstack at the beginning, Blackstack Brewing.
They're
our presenting sponsor.
Free episode. That's right.
Yes, but they're also just a sponsor because 2 things. One, they have a great physical location that you can go to near 94 and 280, where you can get all their beer on tap. And now they've expanded their distribution so that they're in tons of stores across Minnesota and even surrounding Minnesota, I think, right? Like
that's right. Yep. So, I mean, you can find them all the way, all over Minnesota. This is going to feel like a strange thing to say about a craft brewery, but craft breweries can exist for different reasons, and there aren't that many that exist because where even people in the industry are like, oh, they're around because their beer is really good. You'd think that you'd say that about all of the craft breweries, but that's not the case. Some have a really good location, some have a nice brand, some of them are in a good neighborhood, etc. Blackstack is one of those that is recognized throughout the industry as, oh, well, they're around because they make great beer, a lot of good beers, to the point where you can find all kinds of places trying to collaborate with them on making beers. So like their local 755 New England IPA is unbelievable. Their French Pilsner is great. They've got a fun strawberry rhubarb sour. And now, I mean, that was great when they had a tap room, but they were hard to find. Select liquor stores had them. And now, no, they're everywhere. You can find them from, Grand Marais to Rochester from Winona to Fargo. They've got a brand new distributorship, so you should be able to check out and find them at your local liquor store. So
you can go to their website, Blackstack.
Oh, yes.
And they have like a where to find us or where to buy us page, and they'll be adding new ones to that. And if you live by a liquor store that doesn't have them, tell the liquor store, hook it up. Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
So Blackstack, either go to the physical location, the brewery on near 94 and 280, or just look for them in your local beer supplier next time you're out. And
also, I just got my email the other day from my brother telling me when our fantasy football draft is. I will not be attending because I will be on a flight to Brazil. But I will be setting up my cheat sheet for the draft based on everything I learned from RotoWire. Consistently, I'm able to compete on a fantasy basis in a sport I do not pay attention to. Because I rely on RotoWire to guide me through the stuff.
Can they help you with baseball podcasting too, Jeff? That was mean. I had to say it. It was too easy of a joke.
That's true.
Yeah, we've both been long.
They have, by the way.
Yeah, that's okay. This is with help. Okay, we're both longtime RotoWire users. I used to work for a competitor of theirs, so when I say this, I mean it. 2-decade run. Atop the fantasy industry. The thing I value the most is, in addition to the customizable cheat sheets and analysis articles and all that stuff that you can use for your drafts, they also just have a player news database for all sports. Right. It's geared towards fantasy, but I use it more just for life and writing about baseball, where if you want to go look up Byron Buxton's entire injury history, they have every single day of his career that there was injury news. Well, they have the news, a reaction to it, and a link to the original sourcing.
Right.
That I find invaluable when you're trying to look stuff up. And here's what they have for Gleeman and the Geek listeners: a totally free 2-day trial. So you can sign up. It's rotowire.com/Gleeman. You can sign up and do all your fantasy drafts in those 2 days and use all their cheat sheets and rankings, which are updated to the minute. Here's how you know it's actually free. They don't even ask for your credit card.
Right.
It's a totally free 2-day trial because they know if you get a glimpse of their website and their product, you're going to want to continue using it. So that's rotowire.com/Gleeman. Sign up for the 2-day free trial. Use it for your drafts. Use it to prepare for your drafts.
I'll add one other thing. Even if you've already effed up your draft, they're a good thing to do. They have a weekly column on which players you should pick up, that are probably available in your league that are going to be a breakthrough guy 3 weeks from now. They curate all that stuff for you. rotowire.com/Gleeman.
Okay. So injuries. We really should have an injury sound effect or something. Because what is this show covering the Minnesota Twins for the last 15 years than injury updates? Really, it's
you get to, certainly in April and September that seems to be the case. Sort of the late summer, state fair, early fall injury update.
I really, as a college dropout who's generally an idiot, I really never imagined talking about plantar fascia and
now, don't you wish you finished that biology course?
Yeah, tears major strains and I don't know. You'd be hard pressed to get me to be 100% accurate saying what's the hamstring, what's the calf, like on a body.
Right.
And so now we're in a position where every week we're trying to like, parse through all these injury updates with medical stuff and trying to be like, oh, well, but the funny thing is doing this for so long, you start to become not an expert, certainly,
Right.
but in a weird way, a baseball injury expert in that like you've just seen the same injury over and over
Sure.
and you know the timelines.
And
so
you know the timelines, or like, yeah, they usually announced like this, but then it can develop into
Right.
this, and then that,
Right.
like the forearm strain.
Well, yeah, I mean, what I always
doesn't
caution
sound like
people,
much, but
the initial update for like a hit by pitch, someone takes one off the wrist or something like that, is always going to be a contusion.
Mhm.
So-and-so left the game with a contusion, and people always take that as, ooh, that's good news. It wasn't a shattered, whatever wrist.
Right.
It's like, no, it's always a contusion. And then they go for the further testing. Because
Right.
the one thing they can definitely say is he's bruised, which is a contusion.
He has been hit by something.
Yes. So you start to learn the little nuances. And unfortunately with the Twins, what you also learn is rarely are the timelines accurate in a good way. I was going to say accurate, but that could imply that guys were returning much, much sooner than ever expected. That doesn't happen either. So this applies with both of the big updates that we're going to give here. One is Carlos Correa is we're now this is now 5+ weeks since he last played.
Yeah.
Which was July 12th. So it's almost 6 weeks since he last played. Now the All-Star break was in there, obviously. And there's no indication that his return is imminent. I guess I would describe imminent as like in the next 72 to 96 hours, something like that.
Right.
I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, he needs to go on a rehab assignment first. So until you see that he's been
we should
scheduled for a rehab.
The first game of the homestand, we often get even more news on this. Like we might, if you are subscribing to the Patreon Monday, we will probably be discussing in more detail an updated injury report for a lot of these players. So
I hope Monday's show on the Patreon will be discussing Buxton being back in the lineup.
Well, I hope so too.
He's eligible to return tonight. I guess I view that as unlikely, not because I have some great information, but just because taking the over on Buxton missing days is usually a decent bet. And for that matter, taking the over on any Twin missing days is usually a decent bet. So he's eligible to return tonight after the minimum 10-day stay for the hip strain or hip inflammation, I think was the diagnosis. He got a cortisone injection. He's been staying behind and doing running and, fielding and all that stuff. It's a little unlikely. I think they had a chance to probably work him out yesterday, but Nick Paparesta, the trainer, had been on the road trip too, so he hasn't been day to day with them. So it wouldn't surprise me if they get home from the road trip, they don't activate him today. They see how he is. They activate him Saturday or Sunday. I don't know.
Maybe
that's just, again, these are sort of the MOs that we've learned.
We've got a 9-game homestand. It could be any time during that. There's an off day in the middle of there. I never know.
I mean, I'll say this: if he's not in the lineup tonight, which again, I guess I would probably just bet against, but if he's not in the lineup tonight, that really shines a light on how absurd the initial discussion was with this injury, where Buxton, as usual, didn't want to go on the IL. Right. No player wants. I mean, rarely does a player want to go on the IL, and they were like, "Well, are you going to be ready to play tomorrow?" No. You think you'll be ready to play 2 days from now? Probably not. Well, what are we doing? I mean,
we've already missed 3 days. What are we doing?
Right. And so ultimately, the Twins always get heat from fans. I think when it's like, oh, the player wants to play, and the Twins shut him down. The players are not trustworthy on this topic.
Right.
They're trustworthy in a lot of things. I'd let them watch my cat. If I'd let them
to watch your cat.
Oh,
please come over and take Aaron's cat.
Yeah. I'd let them babysit your children, all that stuff. But they are not trustworthy about their own injuries. Because if you ask Byron Buxton, he'll tell you, I'll be in there tomorrow. Whatever. No, you won't. And so with the Buxton situation, my understanding was that the Twins basically said, look, we're three games into this already, 3 days into this already. This is going back a week and a half. We're going to Texas now. Well, I think that was Thursday, Friday, Saturday? Yeah. Or Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It was a Wednesday game versus Kansas City that they wrapped it up.
Right. So they're going to Texas, and it's like, you think you're going to be in the lineup for game one? Oh, definitely not. You think they'll be there in there Friday? Probably not. Well, okay, at that point, you've missed 5 days.
Right.
are we sure you'll be there Saturday, Sunday? Well, not really. No, it's still painful. Well, what are we doing here? The IL's 10 days. Like
Right.
it's
For
such
a hitter, it's 10 days, right?
right. For a hitter, especially, it's such a minor chunk of the season. I mean, realistically, you're going to miss 8 or 9 games, most likely, during the average 10-day stretch. And I mean, with a guy like Buxton, you can argue that he should be getting week-long breaks just randomly throughout the season anyway. Like, if you're a little sore, just take the 10 days. And I'm not saying that from the perspective of being super impressed with Manny Margot and Austin Martin in center field as his replacements.
Sure.
I think both of them have looked pretty bad defensively. Martin, at least, maybe we'll talk more about this later on, has really stepped it up offensively over the last month or so, and that's been a nice surprise. But it's more like, why wait to shut a guy down when what are you waiting for? You're waiting to maybe get 3 extra games of a player who's not 100% healthy. Right. And the downside is you get to like day 6 or day 7. If they're still not in there, then you can only backdate it 3 days and then you're going to be out longer. And so all of this is a very long way of saying, if Buxton's not in the lineup tonight, which is the day he's eligible to return after the minimum 10-day stay, well, then that whole discussion was just really stupid, which I suspected at the time anyway. So we'll see. I mean, if he's not in the lineup during this first series against St. Louis, which is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then you got to think, okay, well, this wasn't just, you know, there was so much focus, I guess, on the clean, quote unquote, MRI afterward. And I think people took that as, well, it was good news.
Sure.
There's a difference between, all they're saying when they say it's clean is that there was no structural damage. You know, someone might say, you know, we took an MRI of his elbow and it was clean. We can still have a strained elbow.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt.
Elbow inflammation.
Right.
And so a lot of the Buxton discussion, as usual, it's like just weird discussion anyway with off injured guys. But it was like, well, why is he not back in there if the MRI is clean? Well, all the MRI had looked at was like, did he tear something in his hip? You know, did he have a torn labrum in his hip? Did he have a, you know, torn whatever? And it was like, no, but, you know, you can still have a strain or inflammation or whatever. Believe me, I've had hip problems all year. But so, yeah, that's the one thing. I would certainly expect Buxton back sooner than Correa. But
oh, sure.
That's mostly because I don't expect Correa back for a while yet. And then the last one, I guess, had 2. One, Brooks Lee. Sounds like he's on the verge of beginning a rehab with the Saints, which is always interesting when a guy who was just playing for the Saints 6 weeks ago is now rehabbing with the Saints as a major leaguer.
Right.
It's like, guys, I'm back, but I'm not at one of you. I'm upstairs still. I'm like, not that he's like that, but I would be like that. Like, yeah, I'm back at AAA, but don't get used to it. I'm going back up to the majors. So he's potentially close. That would certainly help if Correa is going to be out for another 2 weeks. Let's say it would help to have Brooks Lee back for part of that. That at least gives them another option at shortstop. And then last, but well, maybe least also, Alex Kirilloff is close to beginning a rehab assignment. It sounds like, reading some of the quotes from the road trip from Dan, basically Kirilloff, he's been out for what, 2 months with a back injury.
Right.
They initially optioned him to AAA. They rescinded the option and placed him on the IL when he said he was hurt. And it sounds like he was like going to begin a rehab like earlier this week, but he tweaked his ankle, like going through some fielding drills or base running drills or something. Okay. And so that set him back. But it sounds like he's ready. Here's the thing, though, with Kirilloff. I mean, obviously that sucks if you're coming back from one injury to suffer another injury. It's got to be extremely frustrating. However, I don't know where he would fit from a lineup standpoint or just a roster standpoint right now. I mean, one of the things
they're already sitting a pretty good hitter on a regular basis, given the
weird thing
they got the corners.
Because Castro's been needed just at shortstop, it removes so much flexibility from not only their lineups but their in-game moves, and so then you can't just pinch hit anyone for anyone and just say, yeah, Willie will play whatever position.
Right. And
so the weird part now, from the lack of flexibility, because he can only play shortstop, is you have too many good bats, because against a right-handed pitcher, you have Kepler, Wallner, and Larnach from the left side, who you want in there.
Yeah.
You have Carlos Santana, who isn't a great left-handed hitter, but has been an everyday player for you, one of your best players all season, and is your best defender at first base. And then you have the 2 righties in Miranda and Lewis, who are just 2 of your best hitters, period. And so that's 6 guys. Well, the problem for against a right-handed pitcher is you have those 6 guys can really only play left field, right field, first base, third base, and DH.
Right.
That's 5 spots. And really only 2 of them can play third base, and really only 2 of them can play first base. And only 3 of them can play the outfield. So you start to really get pretty limited there. And what we've seen basically is they just sort of randomly pick one of those 6 guys to
Everybody
sit.
gets one day off per week, basically,
Right.
is what it's kind of coming down to, right?
And then it's like, why would they not have Lewis in the lineup against a righty? Why would they not have Santana or Larnick or Wallner? But if you look, they've basically alternated. Like you said, one guy sits this day, the next guy sits that day. And then it's unfortunate because not only are you losing a good bat from the lineup that you'd like to have in there if all things were equal, you're still in a spot where you're playing like Manny Margot or Martin against that righty in center field, or sometimes you're starting, Kyle Farmer at second base or something, because the lack of flexibility means not only are you losing the bat that you'd want to have in there because you have too many guys for those corner spots, but then you're still short because Correa and Brooks Lee are out, and because Castro is only playing shortstop, you're still short at center field and second base. So Lee would solve some of that returning. Correa obviously would solve a lot of that, but Buxton would solve some of that all on his own, because then you aren't playing Margot and Martin as much in center field, and that also frees up Martin, if he's not the one demoted, to make room, frees him up to play some second base too. So that would be big. So we'll see what we'll have a better idea, like we said, Monday. Before
I mean that is sort of an interesting question about what sort of move ends up happening if Buxton is imminently back. When Buxton went down, it was Julian was the call up, right? And you could get away with that because Austin Martin can play second base or center field on that. If Buxton is activated again, I kind of presume Julian is the odd guy out again. He had a hell of a good day on Wednesday, but he hasn't looked particularly good prior to that. But I suppose it could also be Martin.
Yeah. I mean, we're back in the situation where on merit, it might be Margot or it might be Farmer, but you can send Martin or Julian down and keep everyone. Right. You can't send Margot or Farmer packing and keep everyone. You're severing ties with them. And Farmer's played better since he's come back, but Margot, I don't know, not so much. But that'll be interesting. I'm assuming,
and if Lee has a short rehab assignment and they don't have any additional injuries, things get even a little tighter then. So
yeah. Okay. Before we talk about the bullpen, we've put off the bullpen as long as we could because we just did 2 episodes about this where we led with the bullpen just because we had to. How could you not?
Right. Yeah. Both Monday and Wednesday, that was the hot topic after Sundays and Tuesdays losses. Right.
We'll give you sort of a, had time to settle down, bigger picture view of the bullpen situation than we gave both those 2 days. But first, let's talk about our next batch of sponsors here.
Yes.
One of them is Soda Stick, which is a longtime sponsor of ours. What we always say about Soda Stick is go to the site, sodastickco.com, soda like Minnesota, or just Google it.
Right.
I defy you to look at it for more than 100 seconds consecutively and not find a shirt or something that you would want, or that you go, ooh, that's clever.
Yeah.
I like the design on that, because what it is sort of small batch creative Minnesota sports designs. And what I mean by that is, anybody can just get a shirt with a Wolves logo or a Gophers logo or a Twins logo or whatever. Sure. But these are they're not inside jokes, but they're like, you'd have to be a real Twins fan to know this.
Memes.
Yeah, sort of.
A little bit. Right.
I think there's you even, I think, have one of these Hormel Hall Roll of Fame shirts.
Absolutely. I've got one of those.
They had Tony Oliva Hitting School, which I know was a good one. They got the Home Run Sausage shirt still. They're doing town ball stuff with Fox 9. I know they're partnered up with them.
Right.
And there's also non-Twin stuff too, for all other sports.
Yeah, they got every sport. They got a lot of baseball stuff, but they got every sport. And the beauty of going to the site and just kind of checking stuff out today is they have basically 2 big site-wide sales every year. Black Friday and then the State Fair. They have a State Fair site-wide sale right now at sodastickco.com. It is 20% off. Usually when we do this ad, we have to give you a promo code, Gleeman, to get 15% off. You don't need the promo code right now. They're not going to know that we sent you, right? You just get to go there. You find anything on the site that you like, you're going to get 20% off of it right now. And I know it has started. I presume it lasts during the state fair, but I'm not sure how long it lasts, to be honest with you. You might want to just go out there and grab yourself some stuff for about 20% off, because this is we're heading into the pennant race season. Like, you're going to want to be at the ballpark. We're heading into the Viking season. You're heading to the Gopher season. There's a lot to go. So get yourself some Soda Stick stuff.
Our next sponsor, Brixworth Beer, which is in the family of Black Stack. It's a good
Yes.
family.
Right.
Brixworth, excellent spot for pre or post game Twins hangouts, or during games if the game goes poorly.
Yes.
Or you don't want to sit through a rain delay or whatever.
Sure. Yes, for sure.
It's in the old Darby spot, which is how many blocks from Target Field would you say?
2
that
blocks.
is?
Yeah, maybe a block and a half.
Even
Yeah,
for me, it's walking distance. They have a great patio.
Yeah.
Which I've pre-gamed several games with you on that patio.
That is correct.
Great Detroit style pizza at Brixworth, and
number 1 ranked place in Minnesota for Detroit style pizza by the Washington Post. That kind of good.
Because they're in the Black Stack family, they also make good beer or have good beer.
Yeah.
So great patio, good food. I've had burgers from there. I've had the pizza from there. All
wings,
good.
Dana raves about the wings. So.
Yes, Dana Wessel likes the wings from 93X. Dana Wessel, and you like the beer. So what could be better? Go to Brixworth Beer Company, right in the North Loop, a few blocks from Target Field, where the old Darby spot used to be. Great spot to pregame, and then if you'll probably like it so much, you'll probably want to post game there too. Yeah. So Brixworth Beer Company, check them out.
You also have a great Burnsville location if you want to watch the games on TV there.
So, okay, let's talk about the bullpen. So 2 implosions in the span of 60 something hours.
Yeah.
You got Alcala blowing it in Texas, then Okert blowing it in San Diego. Alcala was the 7th inning. Okert was the 8th inning. Both were with very, very big leads, or not very big, but sizable leads and few outs to get, where the Twins were, roughly 90% to win those games. They end up losing both games. Those 2 are the worst WPA, win probability added totals, by any Twins pitcher since last April, when Giovanni Moran had a meltdown in Boston.
You don't mean overall, you mean in a game, right?
Yeah, single game.
That's right.
It's rare to have those, in 3 games, 2 out of 3 games. It's like, that was the worst pitching performance of the season. Oh, wait, no.
To be honest with you, I'm not sure it is that rare that those kind of things tend to line up. And I mean, in this particular case, there is some reasoning behind why they would sort of line up. They are just a thin bullpen right now.
Well, and sure enough, the last time wasn't that long ago when they had either back-to-back or 2 out of 3 horrible bullpen implosions like this. It was 2 years ago when the bullpen was also going to hell. It was Jarrell Cotton one day, and then I think either the very next day or the day after that, Tyler Thornburg had consecutive blow-ups that were very similar to this. So you're right. They can just happen back to back, but they also, I guess it's a little bit of a chicken or the egg, but they often happen when guys are put into spots where they should not be put, or are usually not put, whether that means having to throw for a 3rd time in 4 games or 4 days like Alcala, or just in Okert's case, why is he in the 8th inning with a 2-run lead? That's not usually the spot he's in, but everyone was worn down because the bullpen in general had struggled. So in the first half, the bullpen had a top 10, or the Twins had a top 10 bullpen in, ERA, strikeout to walk ratio, WPA, anything you'd really want to look at. They were in the 7 to 10 range on most of this stuff since the All-Star break, which is now 30 something games, 6 weeks, something like that.
Right.
They're number 28 in bullpen ERA out of 30, and they're number 23 in WPA. And it looks it. I mean, even before these 2 blow-ups, unfortunately, all the blow-ups did, other than turn 2 wins into 2 losses, was kind of confirm what one of our ongoing fears, going back 2 weeks or 2 months, really, but especially post-trade deadline, when the only thing they did at the trade deadline was add Trevor Richards, who we were like, well, that's not going to really help anything. Their problem was, once Brock Stewart went back on the IL and is now out for the season,
right,
And Justin Topa now has been shut down, and it's looking more and more likely that he's just not even going to throw a pitch for the Twins this season because of a spring training knee injury. You're left with basically 4 guys you trust, and it might be 3.5 now because Alcala was one of those 4.
Right.
It's Duran, it's Jax, it's Cole Sands, which, by the way, think of that coming into the season.
Yep.
Cole Sands was going to be undisputably number 3 on that.
Absolutely. I mean, we didn't have that much faith in Alcala just because we didn't have that much faith in him staying healthy. Right.
And then Alcala. And that sounds great. Oh, you got 4 guys that you trust. But what we've seen here is 2 things. One, because of the rookies now filling 3/5 of the rotation, and they've done fine. But as you said earlier, the target for them is, 5 innings of 2 runs, basically.
Right. Yeah. Get through the lineup twice. They're not going to be somebody that you're going to trust to even go through the top of the lineup a third time, let alone all the way through the lineup for a third time.
Now, it's not as if Joe Ryan and certainly not Chris Paddock were consistently going 7 or 8 innings.
Sure.
But Joe Ryan was consistently going 5 2/3, 6, occasionally 7, and the rookies might do that. Simeon Woods Richardson has shown himself capable of doing that. But for the most part, the rookies, even when they're, holding their own, which they have so far, they're getting, 3 outs fewer than Joe Ryan might have gotten, or 3 outs fewer than Chris Paddock might have gotten, or maybe 6 outs once in a while, 4 or 5 in there. And those outs have to be absorbed by the bullpen. And, you add in the fact that they've, first of all, won a lot of games lately, and most of the games they've won lately, and I mean lately, like over the last month, have been close. They've very rarely won like a true blowout. That your high leverage guys are being used in back-to-back games, in 3 out of 4, in 4 out of 6. And if there's more weight or more innings to be absorbed by the bullpen in general, and you're playing a lot of tight games without a lot of days off, you're going to have to choose one of 2 things, like one of 2 paths to handle that. One is you're just going to have to ride those 4 guys you trust and pitch them back-to-back and pitch them 3 out of 4. And we saw that during the Texas series. Everyone pitched at least twice, and Alcala, when he blew it, was pitching 3 out of 4.
Right.
The risk there is, in the short term, just poor performance. Almost any reliever is going to be less effective. Now, it might be that they're at 98% instead of 100%. It's not like they're going to be half as good, but pitching back-to-back days, certainly pitching a 3rd day in a row or a 3rd out of 4, and if you do that over the course of weeks, they might just wear down from just what's left in their tank. And then the longer term risk is just injury. And they cannot afford to lose one of those 4 guys for any length of time, because then, I mean, they just don't have enough coverage for the late leads that they're going to have. And so we kind of, not that it took a genius to see this coming, but once Stewart went down, this was one of our big fears, is like, what's going to happen? And I think they're going to try to take the second approach to that, which is continue to manage and limit the usage of those 4 guys you trust to some extent, which is probably smart in that you don't want to wear down Griffin Jax, because then if he breaks, basically, you're just screwed.
Right.
But the risk there is, if you don't pitch guys back-to-back or 3 in a row or whatever, that's great for keeping them healthy or keeping them, full gas in their tank for the stretch run. But that means guys like Okert, or guys like Richards, or guys like Thielbar are going to have to step into some fairly big spots, like at least medium to high leverage spots. And
you can only hide so many people on that back end, and
right.
sooner or later, some high leverage spots end up coming around. I mean, this is also a stretch of the season where they don't have a lot of off days, where they just came off of 14 games in 13 days, which, can give the bullpen a little bit of a break. You mentioned Joe Ryan going on the aisle. Joe Ryan led the team in innings per start. So he was as close to a workhorse as the Twins had in that rotation.
Right. He was
averaging over 6 innings before his 2-inning outing where he ended up leaving hurt early. And you've a lot of the backup plans, like you said, a lot of the reinforcements, the cavalry that you were kind of hoping was going to show up, whether it's Stewart or Topa or maybe Larnach,
Varland,
I'm sorry, Varland. I end up having, either are not going to be showing up, or you're not sure you really want him to show up because now you've got some issues in depth. You're trying to make up games, so you can't be, tossing away any games. You're trying to win close games on a regular basis, and then you just end up leaning on the high leverage people. In a lot of ways, it's been a perfect storm of stuff, and they thought they were maybe prepared for that storm, but they've also been trying to hide a few guys that they hoped would end up, moving from low leverage to high leverage. And in some cases, like Cole Sands, that's worked, but in some cases, like Caleb Thielbar, that hasn't worked.
Yeah.
So
I think you mentioned Varlin. Well, you mentioned Larnick, but it was Varlin. It's interesting.
I do that a lot.
Yeah, he'd be an interesting conversion.
Yeah.
It's a decent arm in the outfield.
Okay.
I'd probably go for Wallner
probably, yeah. Probably better one, yeah.
The issue with Varlin isn't that he's not available. He's healthy. He just started yesterday, I think, for the Saints. And he's pitched okay, actually, since April when he's been called up for kind of dropped in to make a spot start for the Twins. So, stuff-wise, he's still there. You could still do what you did last season, which is shift him to the bullpen on September 1st and make him a 1 or 2 inning reliever. And we saw the stuff play up, and he looked pretty good in the bullpen. But the problem with that is not only is he your next in-line starter, because now Festa and Zebby Matthews are in the rotation, he started 2 games for them in the last 2 turns of the rotation. He started the Friday, the doubleheader game against Cleveland, and then he started again 5 days later at home. And so it's not even a theoretical, they got to keep Varlin in waiting in the wings because they might need him. Well, they have needed him.
Right.
And you can look at the schedule and say, well, maybe we don't need him here going forward. And I think that is the choice that they're going to have to make, basically, is there isn't really help on the way here. I don't think. I mean, they didn't make a trade at the trade deadline.
Right.
That's not, Richards, but Richards has done absolutely nothing to, move up the hierarchy. He had the one horrendous game, and he's thrown some scoreless innings since then, but he's been bouncing pitches, throwing pitches to the backstop, walking guys. It hasn't been pretty. And neither of the 2 lefties have had sustained success. Ogert appears to just be, plummeting down the hierarchy, basically. And
Josh Thomas available.
Yeah, Josh Staumont is available. I know everyone threw a fit over the Twins letting him go. He signed a minor league deal with the Cubs, pitched twice for Iowa, which is the Cubs AAA affiliate, got 3 outs and walked 5 and was released. So he's available. If you're just purely looking at ERA.
When you're sitting there going, boy, maybe Josh Winder is the savior. When you're at that point, that you're starting to maybe overreach a little bit in terms of what you are looking for.
I do think I would give Josh Winder another opportunity.
I thought
he got kind of a raw deal last time in that he had pitched well 3 in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed the spot for Varlin to come up and make a spot start. And because he has options remaining, they sent him down. Then that means he's got to stay in the minors for 2 weeks, which is, coming up here now. He'll be available to call up. I would like to see him get called up. But like you said, we've seen Josh Winder, and if he's healthy, I think he does have an opportunity. He's really never gotten the opportunity to just be a 1-inning reliever, because they've been holding out hope that he could be a starter or a long reliever or something like that. And he's just had so many arm and shoulder problems over the years. But the stuff is pretty good, and we've seen other guys who have struggled to miss bats as a starter, including Louis Varlin, move to the bullpen, and it's a completely different story. And my hope would be that his velocity and stuff can play up, and that Winder can also stay healthier, pitching 1 inning at a time. So I would like to see him get a chance for that, next week or something like that. But yeah, realistically, what are the odds that Josh Winder a month from now is going to be pitching the 7th inning of a close game?
Right. He's not necessarily you want to look at as a high leverage reliever, but he does sort of emphasize how grim things are, because even as a medium leverage guy, I'm like, well, you know what? It's not so much that we don't have enough high leverage guys. It's that we go from high leverage straight down to I'm a little nervous. I just want a couple of guys in the middle there that, if I put them in an ideal situation, I have a pretty good sense that it's going to work out.
Well, or even if you just think of it as high, medium, low leverage guys.
Right.
When you play 2 close games in a row and you've used, let's say the starter goes 5, and then you go Sands, Alcala, Jax, Duran, and you close it out.
Right.
And then you do it again the next day. Or maybe you do that 3 times in 4 days, which that's great. You probably won 3 of those games.
Right.
The next lead that comes up, if it's the next day after that, they're not going to be available, or at least several of them are not going to be available. And normally you would like to, when your high leverage guys are unavailable in bulk like that, you'd like to be able to elevate a couple of the medium leverage guys to high leverage and then elevate a couple of the low leverage guys to medium leverage. But as you noted, and I agree, there are no medium leverage guys.
Right. Yeah.
There's only basically the high leverage guys.
Right.
And maybe you could say that Alcala is a medium leverage guy, except he's needed in high leverage. So you don't have anyone, you have to promote guys. It's like promoting someone from single A to the majors or double A to the majors. You'd like to promote guys from double A to triple A and from triple A to the majors, but there are no medium leverage guys. So you're just basically having to, throw guys like Okert or Thielbar or Richards in there and just go, look, we got it. Richards closed out a game at Target Field after his Wrigley blowout because they had used everybody up. I think it was game 2 of the doubleheader actually. And they had used everybody up. And it was like, well, here comes Richard. Hold on to your butts here. Like, here we go. Right. And that's just what happens. And sometimes it works out okay, obviously. The one card they do have left to play is Varlin. And I guess I'm of the opinion that they should just do it and put him in the bullpen and let him throw 1 or 2 innings here. And I think he can be that middle inning guy or that middle leverage guy for sure. And I'm not saying he's going to come in and fix everything. I mean, it's Louis Varlin still. Like, he's more upside as a reliever, but it's hardly as if he has 200 good innings of relief under his belt. He just has 1 good month, basically last September. That does open you up that if one of the now current 5 starters gets hurt, or Zebby Matthews struggles as a rookie might struggle, or Festa or whoever, well, then you're no longer going to have Varlin available to step into that rotation. And so then your next in line starter is like Dobnak or Caleb Bosley or Andrew Morris way ahead of schedule or somebody like that. Right. But I think they're close enough to the end of the season that I guess I would be focused on plugging the hole that's, leaking right now.
I mean, we're at about 7 starts per pitcher at this point left in the season, right? We've got about 30 something like that games left. So 6 or 7 starts per pitcher at this point. I don't know at what point you feel like, okay, I don't know at what point they feel like, or that what I would feel like at like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to roll the dice and I'm going to get 4 more starts out of this guy one way or the other.
Yeah.
Or 6 more starts out of this guy one way or the other.
How I would do it is, first of all, you have 8 more days until the roster expands where you can add 1 more pitcher and 1 more position player on September 1st. That between now and then, I think Zebby Matthews will be starting twice.
Okay.
I think I would evaluate his next 2 starts during this 9-game homestand.
Yeah.
If at that point he still looks, pretty good, he's still going 5. He's not gotten knocked around in what would then be 4 total starts. And more, just as importantly, if none of the 5 guys are hurt at that point, like a week from now, basically, after they each make 2 more turns, then I think you just got to go look. It's not ideal. We like the idea of having Varlin as the 6th starter, whether he's needed or just he's the break glass in case of emergency guy. But the bullpen might qualify as an emergency now, or at least urgent care, as we like to say right now. And so I think if you can get to September 1st, it's convenient from a roster standpoint. You can just add a pitcher and it can be Varlin, which is what they did last year. But I also think you've chewed through two turns more in the rotation, so you probably only have like 4 left instead of 6 or 7 left, and you've also doubled the number of opportunities to evaluate Zebby Matthews' readiness, and Festa for that matter too. But so I feel like if you can get to September 1st and you feel okay, or at least as okay as you currently do with the rotation, I feel like you got to just kind of bite the bullet and go, look, we need Varlin. Here's I guess how I would look at it. And I don't even think I'm like the biggest Varlin Bobo at this point. Like, but I do think he's a major league pitcher. And I certainly think he's one of their 13 or in September, 14 best pitchers.
Sure.
And at this point, with a month to go in a pennant race, you should have your 14 best pitchers in the majors healthy. And he's one of them. So the question to me is what role? Because he should be in the majors at this point. Like, you can't be screwing around with Ronnie Henriquez and Okert and Richards in pitching the 6th or 7th inning when you have a power arm who has the potential to be much, much better than them And he's 26 years old too. I
Right.
mean, this is his second full year at AAA. So I would like to see them deploy Varland in some capacity in September. I think they probably will.
Well, and
And
in
to me,
October, like they also have a
right,
90% chance of making the postseason here. You know he's not going to be starting for you in the postseason.
right.
Yeah. So if that's going to be his role on October 1st, I don't know why you wouldn't start converting him at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think it's just a given that at some point they're going to start converting him to the bullpen. Like
Well, I mean,
sometime in the next 5 weeks, he's going to be moved to the bullpen. The question is it happen this week or does it happen 3 weeks from now?
right.
And
I mean, this is the same conversation we had last year, and they ended up basically on September 1st. So I guess
Right.
that's how I would lean. And you just hope that everybody can make 4 turns, because it doesn't sound like Paddock. I mean, Paddock might be a bullpen option also at the end of the season, but Paddock also
Right.
might just not come back.
yeah.
And I think the odds of him coming back with enough time to build up to start, like to throw 4 or 5 innings at a time,
No.
are going to be pretty slim. And so, that factors into it too, I guess. But yeah, that's how I would view Varland. And again, much like with Winder, I have a little more faith that Varland could be an impact reliever immediately because he showed that in September last year. And I just think from a stuff perspective, it plays probably as 1 inning at a time. But we also shouldn't sit here and go, well, the bullpen's struggling, but they still got that ace in the hole, Louis Varland.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
he's only going to fix so much. It's not like he's not, pre-injury Brock Stewart at that point. So you would hope that maybe he can be that 5th guy, after Alcala, but well ahead of like the Richards, Okert,
it is interesting that, if everybody stays healthy, right, as in the bullpen right now, and you add Varland, and maybe Paddock comes back, and maybe Winder is a good medium leverage guy, that we could be by, 3rd week of September thinking, we'll roll with this bullpen into the postseason, no problem, after being the 28th overall bullpen since the All-Star break. There's a chance of that because bullpens can change that fast. 1 or 2 really good arms can change that, end up being somebody you trust in a high leverage situation, can change things in an awful hurry. Now, can also change a lot in an awful hurry that Alcala, this little blip we've seen from Alcala is a symptom of a bigger problem or something like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I might win Powerball
it's a
this
journey.
Week, in which case this podcast is over. But probably we should plan as if that won't happen.
Sure,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Before we get to some other stuff and finish up, let's talk about our last batch of sponsors. This is a new sponsor.
Yeah.
Hims.
This is one that I'm very interested in.
Trying
out here.
With a target demo for this is what you're saying?
Listen, I'm trying to decide if I should just give up and just go bald, which I don't actually have a problem necessarily with kind of going bald.
Yeah.
Like I'll just shave my head and go bald. I don't really have eyebrows. Like I don't know exactly how that's gonna work.
You're worried about big featureless.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like
pretty much it.
So
Yeah.
when you're out there committing crimes and people try to do the police sketch artist, and they go, "Well, what did he look like?" Nothing really. He just
looked
was
like
a
Uncle
bald guy.
Fester. I don't know.
All right. But yeah, Hims has a wide range of hair loss treatments that work all from the comfort of your couch. They can make it real simple, doctor trusted treatment options, clinically proven ingredients that can regrow hair, they say, in as little as 3 to 6 months.
Finasteride, minoxidil, all the stuff that they've, this is something that's come a long ways in the last 20 years. And they've got all of that. And the process is super simple. It's 100% online. You just answer a few questions. A medical provider will determine if the treatment is right for you. And if it's prescribed, your treatment is sent directly to your door.
Yes. Results may vary.
Sure.
It's based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil. Prescription products required an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See the website for full details and important safety information, but you can start your free online visit today at hims.com/Gleeman. That's HIMS, hims.com/Gleeman for your personalized hair loss treatment options. That's hims.com/Gleeman. And then lastly,
game time. We've got a week, 9 days to grab some tickets for some Twins games. I'll be honest with you, the ballpark has been hopping the last few times I've been there. It's not as easy to just grab tickets as it used to be, but it's easy if you've got Game Time. But Game Time isn't a website; it's an app. So take a little time here, download the app, and then when you sign up for an account, use the promo code Gleeman, and you're gonna get like a $20 credit that you can use on your first purchase. So, and that way you're all prepared when you are, at Brixworth having yourself a beer on the patio and you want to go to the game. You just go on that app, pull it up. You can see all the available. You can see which ones are the very best deal. They've got last minute deals. They got flash deals. They got zone deals. They got all in one pricing. Seat views, a lowest price guarantee. All you have to do is just go in the app to go to Game Time and download that app. So
create an account, use the code Gleeman, $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but just create an account on the Game Time app. Redeem the code GLEEMAN and you get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Okay. The last thing on the bullpen, I guess. Well, two things. One, it's definitely worth noting that they basically have had, since the end of last season, when the bullpen was pretty strong, it was at its strongest, I would argue, in September and October. They added 5 relievers via either trades or free agency who are like on minor league or major league contracts, like major league relievers.
Right.
There have been some other guys they added to minor league deals and called up, but you'll see what I mean. Here's the 5. And then after I read this, think to yourself, why are they in the spot that they're in with the bullpen? Okert, who they got from the Marlins for Nick Gordon.
Right.
Jay Jackson, who they signed for $1.5 million, 36 years old, journeyman. Justin Topa,
and is now DFA'd.
Oh,
right?
wait,
he's not with the St. Paul anymore.
We'll go through where they are.
Okay, all right.
Number 3 is
I don't want to ruin the ending.
Justin Topa. It's a jump scare at the end.
I could see.
Justin Topa, who was acquired from Seattle, part of the Jorge Polanco trade, is now halted his rehab for a second time and hasn't thrown a pitch and probably won't throw a pitch for the Twins this season. Josh Staumont, who, as we just noted, just got released by the Cubs AAA team, who was signed for like $1 million. And then at the trade deadline, most recently, Trevor Richards was the acquisition. As you jumped the gun and ruined my great, you spoiled the spoiler alert. Jackson and Staumont have both been released. Jackson was released a long time ago in the first half of the season.
And then he was actually DFA'd and then stuck around and then DFA'd again. Yeah.
Right. I believe
those two have been released a total of 3 times.
Yes. And now Staumont by the Cubs too.
4, yeah. Okay.
I think the thought from a few Twins folks that I talked to is that Jackson's going to retire. But I don't know if that's the case. So those two have been released after not pitching particularly well. Topa hasn't thrown a pitch since March for them and probably won't. Okert was not last seen. He pitched last night, or Wednesday, but has a 5-something ERA and has been just completely unusable in anything resembling a leverage opportunity. He's been a 180 opponent's batting average in low leverage, and then 1,000-something OPS in medium and high leverage. He's been 1,000 OPS against right-handed hitters, which means you can't use him in normal matchups. I mean, he's just been a mess all season. And then Richards, who, has recovered okay from that ghastly appearance at Wrigley.
Ghastly, you say?
Yeah. When you say?
I think that's a really good adjective for that.
Thank you. Well, I'm a writer. I don't know what made me think of that. But that he's like the best of your 5 right now, like those 5. Right. And so when you say,
so they're getting better is what you're saying.
Oh yeah, definitely.
He's the one they just got.
So, Brock Stewart's injuries have been a part of it, but I would argue, if anything, with both Sands and Alcala, the outcomes there are very much better than you could have anticipated. I mean, anybody other than Do Young Park, who's the fan club president of Cole Sands fan club, who anticipated Cole Sands being, a quality setup man, like legitimately 3rd on the pecking order, not just because they're thin. I mean, is lying if anybody anticipated that. And Alcala has missed most of the past 3 years while injured. Now, if you said he was going to be healthy, this isn't a surprise. I mean, he's had good stuff and good upside this whole time, but this is far and away more they could have expected from one or both of those guys.
Sure.
And yet, even with outcomes like that are good, and Jax has taken a step forward too.
Right.
And Duran's been, available since missing the opening of the season with a oblique. He hasn't been as dominant as he was, but he's been healthy. They're still thin. Well, the reason is you brought in 5 guys and they've all stunk.
Right.
And 3 of them aren't even options, and the 2 that are, you don't really want to use. And so, the lesser resources, because the payroll cuts played a part in that. I mean, they didn't have Jay Jackson and Josh Stallman at the top of their reliever list, but in general, the Twins have not spent money on relief pitching.
I mean, let's be honest. It's a organizational priority or non-priority has been, paying for a bullpen. They will not do it. Haven't done it really since Addison Reed, or maybe to some extent, Colomé. And I don't disagree with that philosophy. Just FYI,
right.
And they have had a lot more luck with sort of developing internal arms, or, as we saw last year, switching roles for players, especially as the season goes on or as we get into late September. I think as they approached the trade deadline, I would say 2 months ago, on top of all the other options that we said, we hoped might be replacements or reinforcements that could be coming, we might have included Festa or Matthews as part of that 2 months ago, right? And I mean, they are here. They are reinforcements. They're just reinforcements of the rotation now, because you ended up having a couple of injuries there. Now, you might have been able to anticipate at least one of those injuries, the Paddock one. I don't know. They managed to make do with their bullpen philosophy overall, but yeah, when things get thin like they are now, or when you go through a stretch like they've gone now, or a stretch, we've seen the same stretch at different times of the year in different years, right? We saw it in early April in 2022. I think we saw it in June in 2023, or no, maybe no, you're right, 21 and 22, right? And I mean, I think we saw it last year, right about end of July, early August,
right?
Where we were wondering why they weren't pulling the trigger on any trades then.
And the bullpen was great. I mean, to your point, yeah, bullpens can change a lot more quickly than any other area of the team, because adding like one guy,
right?
And I don't even mean adding, but like the emergence of one trustworthy guy,
yeah, right,
can change everything. And being able to add a couple of them like they did last year really changed everything, to the point that the bullpen like barely resembled the relief unit from 2 or 3 months ago. Maybe they still have time to make that happen. I'm not really seeing the levers that can be pulled.
Right.
And
no,
I hear surprised.
I mean, Caleb Thielbar ended up being that several years in a row. 2021, right. 2022, 2023, where we were like, boy, we could really use one other guy to step in, and it ended up more often than not being Caleb Thielbar, who was sort of a medium leverage left-hander who ended up becoming a high leverage guy that you trusted in the 7th inning for a couple years in a row. And I think, to some extent, they're hoping maybe that they could recapture that this year. It hasn't happened, and now they're stuck with a back of the bullpen where you've got 4 guys that you're hoping will develop into something, but you usually want 2 of those guys. And then you want 2 guys that you have medium leverage, and 4 guys that you have high leverage. So
the other thing, we talked a lot more, like we said, when we were reacting kind of next morning to some of these bullpen blowups, but I think it's worth noting for my partially different audience here, is the sort of like functional aspect, or how does it actually play out when bullpen moves are made? Because inevitably, when Alcala comes in and just implodes, or Okert comes in and implodes, it's like, well, why didn't they see that sooner and remove him sooner? Right. But we went through the timeline on Alcala's, and it wasn't that much different for Okert, for that matter. That happened pretty quick too. It wasn't as quick, but I know for Alcala last Sunday, he came in, and the first run scored 40 seconds after he threw his first pitch.
Right.
The second run scored like a minute and 10 seconds after he threw his first pitch. And then then there was a mound visit, at which point they started to warm up Griffin Jax. Like 2 minutes after Alcala's appearance started.
Right.
That's as quick as you're ever going to see that. And as we've talked about, first of all, then the game-tying home run from Garcia happened like a minute and a half or 2 minutes after that. And so within 4 total minutes, or like 4.5 total minutes, he had given up the whole thing in 19 total pitches, basically. But then it was only like 2 minutes after Jack started that the game was already tied.
Right.
And so it's not a video game where you can just click and bring in the next reliever. I mean, you can, but they're going to be ineffective and possibly injury risk. Like it takes guys, and this varies by player. Some guys need a half hour to get ready. Some guys need, 20 throws to get ready. But they all need more than 2 minutes. And then I know the other thing is, well, why didn't they just have them all warmed up to go? Well, you might see that in the playoffs, but I can tell you this, that relievers view warming up as certainly not as taxing physically as actually pitching, but it's not nothing. And so there's the term we joke about, dry humping, which is if you ask a reliever to warm up like twice in a game and you don't pitch him, you dry humped him, which basically, you can say you basically pitched without pitching at that point.
That's right.
And so the danger is, you warm up, let's say, Alcala with a 4-0 lead in Texas for the 7th inning. You're not also going to have double barrel action there unless there's a lefty-righty matchup situation, but that would have been Okert or Thielbar, and I don't know that people want to see them either.
Right.
But you're not going to have Jax, let's say, warming up simultaneously, especially in a 4-0 game, because if you do that every time, or even a lot of the time, you're going to burn out guys like Jax because you're adding to what is already a pretty high normal workload. And so if you have them warm up,
you can't do that in a 162 game season.
Right.
Like you just can't do it.
If they're pitching 4 times a week, but also warming up 2 additional times and not pitching 4 times a week or 2 times a week, that's just a lot more workload. And so I get that when a guy comes in and just implodes, just melts down, as Alcala did and as Okert did, you just take a very winnable game and turn it into a loss, basically. The first reaction is like, why did we let this happen? But when it from start to finish is 4 minutes, or 15 pitches or whatever it was, it's very hard to be prepared for that. It's very hard. And even if you are sort of on watch for that, which I would argue they were in the Alcala situation, they had their best reliever warming up within 2 minutes of his first pitch. Right. But it takes a couple of minutes at least. It takes, 3-4 minutes. The guy's got to throw 15, 20 pitches at minimum in the bullpen. So that's, as people react to blown leads, hopefully there aren't anymore, but assuming there are some, just think about kind of the functionality of, well, what would have had to happen here? Now, if you want to just say, why were they using Alcala? Well, that's, hindsight, I think. Now you could say, why were they using him 3 out of 4? And it was a 4-0 lead. Theoretically, that was a lower leverage spot than you would normally use him in. But then the alternative there wasn't going to be Jax. It was going to be Richards probably, or, whoever. And then with Okert, you can certainly make the argument of, what's he doing anything close to, the 8th inning of a 2-run game or a 3-run game, 2-run game, 5-3, 2-run game. And I'm with you on that. But as we talked about, you got to make a choice. You're either going to always go to Cole Sands and always go to Jax in those spots. Yeah. And they want to stay away from Alcala.
And you've got a bunch of lefties coming up. I mean, they did try to get through that without going to one of their, 2, higher leverage arms. They had already used Jax. They wanted to save Duran for the 9th. They need to either go with Sands or Alcala. Alcala had pitched 2 days earlier. Sands had 2 days off.
Right.
So maybe he makes sense, but maybe they're trying to be careful with those 2 arms, and you've got a bunch of lefties coming up, and that's a great time to go with a left-handed reliever. And it turns out.
Now, was that specific spot the spot that I would have deployed Stephen Okert? No, but there has to be a spot where he's going to be used. And Baldelli's not making the roster. So what were his other options? Well, he could have gone to Cole Sands there. And that was my expectation.
And then had Sands face a lot of lefties.
Right.
Yeah.
But they don't want to burn him out either, because if Cole Stans turns back into a pumpkin or gets injured, they're screwed because they don't have anything else. So,
Right.
it's just worth noting, I think, on the bullpen front. But let's see. We'll finish up here with a couple other quick notes. We talked about Simeon Woods Richardson, another good start.
Right.
3.69 ERA in 22 starts this season. I always say it the same, but he's really saved their ass. I mean, he really
Right.
has.
Yeah.
Just it was supposed to be DeSclafani.
Right.
He was immediately out for the season. Louis Varland gets put into that role and goes 0-4 with a 9-something ERA through 4 starts. They bump him from the rotation. They go to Simeon Woods Richardson, who there was optimism all spring because he came in throwing harder. He had worked all offseason long with Twins coaches on smoothing out his mechanics.
And we saw it early in spring training. We saw the velocity was up.
But he was terrible at AAA last year and not that great the year before.
Right.
And he's still 23 years old with basically no experience. He had like 9 innings in the majors the previous 2 years. For him to jump in and basically just consistently be solid with some real high points that were beyond solid during that, especially of late, a 3.70 ERA in 22 starts from a rookie pitcher. I mean, you're doing some things. And the thing with him, not like we said, the offseason work that he put in with coaches to change his mechanics and change just sort of his delivery took him from last year throwing 89 to 91, which is just not enough,
right,
to now throwing 93, 94. And the really impressive thing is, you would expect a 23-year-old rookie to start to wear down a little bit late in the season, not only from a performance standpoint, but from a just velocity standpoint. Instead, his velocity has risen each month to the point that his average fastball is now like a mile per hour faster than it was in April. And we've seen him late in starts hit 96. I think he even hit a 97 against the Padres. That's so impressive to me. And it does hint at the potential for more upside with Simeon Woods Richardson. But I mean,
which is good because his strikeout rate is not particularly impressive.
Yes.
Like there are some things to be cautious about going overboard on Simeon Woods Richardson, and one of the ways to be cautious about him, even if you're looking for success the rest of the year, and or is he the third guy that they're going to be looking for in the postseason, is dude's a 1 inning from his career high in innings pitched right now, and he's got, like you said, 6 starts more to go. He last year was his career high with like 113 innings. He's at 112. So, we keep saying you got to temper expectations on Simeon Woods Richardson. And fortunately, he keeps proving us wrong. He keeps challenging us to set expectations even higher. But that's credit to him. He's
already passed. I mean, you'd want to include the AAA, so he's already passed his career high.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I forgot he was pitching in AAA this year. Right.
Yeah. But the other thing of note there is, he's the example of this, but I would also say so far, at least, Festa and Matthews have been an example of this too, which, when DeSclafani goes down, there were a lot of ways to try to fill that spot. Well, we talked about Michael Lorenzen possibly, and he's been pretty good in general, but low ERA at least, hasn't pitched that great. But there are a lot of years and a lot of teams and a lot of fan bases and a lot of front office that might go, well, we need a veteran guy there. And certainly, when Varland struggles, then you might go, oh, let's just where's Dallas Keuchel? Put him in there.
Right.
But this is why, while the perception is that veterans provide a higher floor or less downside than rookies, but I don't really think that's true, but that's certainly conventional wisdom.
Sure.
It's undeniable that the performance they've gotten from Simeon Woods Richardson is above and beyond anything they could have gotten from anyone, or at least an expectation from some veteran off the street in mid-April or even late in spring training. And to then continue that with Festa and Matthews, they got to keep it going, because it doesn't help if you don't keep it going. But, compared to like Rich Hill or Dallas Keuchel, who I just saw is like in Japan now, I think. Yeah. But this is why going with rookies, and anybody who's listened to the podcast for the life of the podcast remembers these conversations in maybe a more frustrating way with the previous regime, which was like, can we just stop signing Ramon Ortiz and Sidney
The truth
Ponson.
is that was prior to the podcast.
That's true.
That was 2008, 2009. Yeah, that was if you're an old blog reader from the way back time. Yeah,
the Tehran regime early on was so hesitant
Ortiz
to just hand over a job to a rookie. I mean, we saw it at shortstop with like Jason Bartlett couldn't get the job over Juan Castro, and we saw it with Tony Batista at third base, and we saw it with all these starting pitchers.
Saw it with Kenny Rogers over Johan Santana.
That's right. And
that was the one that was drove me crazy.
We were begging for the young guys to get an opportunity, and they eventually would, obviously. But I think the downside benefit that veterans have over rookies is so much more about perception than reality.
Yeah.
As if Rich Hill, or as we saw with Dallas guys, can't come in and just be horrible. And the upside that rookies offer is undeniable compared to these guys. And we're seeing it with Simeon Woods Richardson. Hopefully we'll continue to see it with Festa and Matthews. And also just from a fan standpoint, it's just a whole hell of a lot more fun to watch a 23-year-old, a 24-year-old, and a 25-year-old.
It is provided they do medium well. It's real frustrating if they're not.
Absolutely. Right. So I just wanted to highlight that. Let's see. The last couple of things. Talked about Stallmont. Jeffers has like 7 homers in his last 15 games, something like that. This is the first time we've joked kind of how Vasquez and Jeffers have done like body swaps couple of times here, where Jeffers is amazing in April and part of May, and he starts to slump. For a while they're both slumping, then Vasquez is hitting like 350 and it's still been on a roll here lately, where Jeffers is just in a big funk. Then Jeffers now of late, over the last couple of weeks, has turned it around in a big way. This is really the first time in 2 years where they've been the tandem where they've both been playing well at the same time, which is interesting. Like, I don't know that it's really going to change much from a usage standpoint, because as we talked about,
this is making up for June.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. But the problem is, as we talked about, like they already have enough corner guys. So moving one of them, let's say, to DH against a lefty, doesn't really help that much, because you've already got it. Helps a little bit more against a lefty than it would against a righty, because then Wallner, Larnach, and Kepler aren't really to your benefit there. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to alternate catchers. The goal of doing that is to keep them fresher than they would have been if one of them would have been catching 2/3 of the time. This is now the second straight season where they've essentially only used 2 catchers. Jair Camargo was up very, very briefly, and last year they were the only American League team to only use 2 catchers.
Yeah.
This is certainly a credit to the implementation of basically splitting it 50-50. I mean, to play back-to-back seasons where you've essentially, setting aside their performance, but where you basically have just used 2 catchers for 2 full seasons is like unheard of, essentially, at that position.
And you're getting the best out of them late in the season.
That's what I'm looking at now,
for catchers. Yeah.
So we'll see. But that's worth noting, I think. And then the very last thing I mentioned, Austin Martin. I mean, look, we're talking about Simeon Woods Richardson being great. We're talking about Austin Martin finding a role here.
Yeah.
That Jose Barrios trade is looking pretty damn good.
Yes.
You traded 1.5 years of Jose Barrios for the full careers of those 2 guys. Barrios signed an extension with Toronto, but go look at Jose Barrios' strikeout rate if you want a jump scare, by the way. He's had an okay season, but he is not missing any bats now. Actually, I think we're going to see Jose Barrios at the end of the homestand.
Oh, I suppose so.
So we're going to see Sonny Gray. We're going to see Jose Barrios, probably some other old friends. And then the very last thing is a thought I had on the Patreon that I will leave people with here, which is the manager, same as a coach of another team. Anytime a loss happens, it's their fault. A lot of fans react that way in the moment. Especially something in the bullpen happens, it's Rocco's fault. Something in the whatever, it's Rocco's fault. Okay, fine. But then also, front office didn't do anything at the deadline, didn't do anything at the offseason. And, they shouldn't
cut payroll in the offseason.
Well,
$30 million of payroll.
Yeah. That was the ownership, but we can toss that in too.
Yeah, right.
So they suck by a lot of people's estimation. And then you look at the players and you go, every year it's the same thing. Everybody's injured. Why aren't these guys tougher? Why aren't they, Buxton's hurt every year. Correa's now got the exact same injury. He thought he was going to be out a week. He's been out 6 weeks, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if you're into, let's buy into all that for a moment. The worst impulses of the worst fans, whatever it is. Let's put ourselves in those smelly shoes. If the manager's bad and ownership slashing payroll and the front office isn't doing a good job and all the players are constantly injured, how the hell are they winning games?
Right.
If all those things are true, how are they going to make the playoffs for the fourth time in 6 years under Baldelli? How are they in prime position to win back-to-back division titles? How do they have the best record in the American League since a horrible start to April?
Right.
And I'm not sitting here bragging on the Twins. I mean, they're a above average team who has a chance to be a 90-something win team, has a chance to be an 80-something win team.
Right.
But somebody has to be doing a good job somewhere. You know what I mean? And I feel like so much of the time I want to stop people while they're yelling. First of all, why are you yelling at me? So often the first reaction I have to this, but that's fine. I've sort of made peace with the fact that doing this job, you just become sort of a wall at which people can scream.
Yeah. You become the venting.
Right.
The venting
But
post.
So the first thing I often want to say when people are so angry at Twitter, but sending it to me is, what are you telling me for? Like, what do you want me to do about it? But I've gotten past that. The other thing I find myself wanting to say is, where are the wins coming from? Where's the success coming from? The Twins under Baldelli, which is now, this is the 6th season. I think they're 7th or 8th in wins out of 30 teams during that time. And they're certainly bottom third of the league in payroll during that time. They're probably 20th or something like that in payroll. That even suggests they're outpacing sort of what ownership has given them to work with in terms of resources. Now, in years past, the quality of the division has played in their favor, but that's not even true this year anymore because the division's pretty damn good other than the White Sox. So that's kind of, I don't know, what I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is I'm fine believing, maybe the manager could be better. Maybe the front office could be better. Certainly ownership hasn't helped them. And you're not going to be able to argue that the key players on this team have not been injured over the past several years. However, they're not being, 90 wins are not being dropped on their front door by a stork. Like somebody is creating these wins at some point. There is some aspect of this organization.
I think there's a simple answer, Aaron. It's just everybody else sucks.
Well, they're worse than the Twins.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's the answer.
Yeah, I guess, but then we got to start grading on a curve, right? I mean, like
losers grade on curves, Aaron.
Well, as I always say, John gets a big head by being the best looking co-host on this podcast.
Sure. Yeah.
And the most charming co-host on this podcast.
Yeah.
That doesn't do him that much good out in the real world, though.
No.
So the flip side is true. Okay, if you think the Twins are horrible across the board here at everything, and your argument is, well, yeah, they're bad at everything we just named, but everyone else is, mostly worse. I have news for you then. They're not bad at everything. Like, right. So yeah, I don't know. I don't mean to, we've certainly had plenty of criticism. We just ripped them for not adding to the bullpen. You can rip them, I ripped them all off season. I've ripped ownership consistently. There are a lot of areas that you can criticize. There's no doubt that the injury component is frustrating. I would hesitate to criticize anybody for that necessarily, but whatever. All I would ask is, as people are lobbing these things and just stewing after every loss and thinking, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks, everything sucks. I'm not trying to take away that frustration because some of these losses have been very frustrating. But just think to yourself, how are they, 16 games above 500? How have they made the playoffs probably what will be a fourth time in 6 years? Some aspect of this has to be working, or at least not working.
I would suggest the one area for the Twins that is really working is their podcast game, and you can get even more of that if you join the Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. We will be doing probably a deeper dive into the injuries and also reviewing the results of this weekend series on Monday. We got the mailbag on Wednesday. We've got special guests on a regular basis. It's totally ad-free. I will also warn you that 2 weeks from now, there will not be a free podcast, and there may not be one 3 weeks from now because I'm going to be traveling around to Brazil. So, you might be going a while without your Twins podcast. If you would like to make sure that you don't miss out on that, just $1 an episode. You just go to patreon.com/Gleeman, you sign up. By the end of the season, you'll probably spend $10, which is about 2/3 of a Target Field beer. And then you'll be also prepared for the postseason, which right now Baseball Reference says we got a 90% chance of covering. So
thank you to Blackstack, who is our presenting sponsor.
Special thank you to Blackstack. They're the ones that you are fortunate to be able to get great beer all over Minnesota right now. So just stop by your favorite liquor store, the Blackstack
and also,
tap room, to grab your favorite brewer, try something new. Yep.
Thank you to RotoWire. Thank you to Soda Stick, to Bricksworth Beer, to Hims, and to Game Time. Yes. We hope to see everyone on the Patreon side bright and early Monday morning. And if not, we'll see you Wednesday or Friday.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Gleeman